Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Subcontinent, a weekly show that aims to address the most significant issues in the South Asian region that affect the governments, the people and the region as a whole. And as always, we will explore and explain its geopolitics, untangle the arguments from different perspectives and make the alternative voices heard. So, stay tuned.
In this edition of the Subcontinent, we will discuss security dialogue on Afghanistan hosted by New Delhi, which sought to evolve a pan-regional response to security challenges facing Afghanistan. And we shall look at the unfolding humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, with millions of people on the brink of starvation, and how freezing of Afghan assets by the US has contributed to this disaster.
As Afghanistan continues to grapple with economic and humanitarian disasters, concerns regarding the rapidly deteriorating security situation have also assumed alarming proportions. That's what brought top regional security officials to New Delhi on November 10th to discuss the impact of the hasty US withdrawal and the stunning resurgence of Daesh in Afghanistan and the region. The participants sought to evolve a pan-regional response to security challenges facing the region and to pressurize the Taliban to form an inclusive government in Kabul.
Amidst the worsening humanitarian situation, Afghanistan has been rocked by a spate of terrorist attacks in recent weeks, sparking fresh concerns in the region. The resurgence of the Daesh terrorist group on the back of the US withdrawal from the country is particularly seen with great concern by Afghanistan's neighbors, including India and Iran. On November 10th, New Delhi convened a regional security conference on Afghanistan that saw the participation of top security officials from several regional countries. The objective was to evolve a pan-regional consensus on improving the regional security environment and to address fresh security challenges facing Afghanistan. The strongly worded declaration held complete unanimity between all 8 participants in combating terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, and demanded an open and truly inclusive government that represents the will of the people of Afghanistan. It also suggested the formation of a regional coalition to push the Taliban on living up to its commitments. For India, Delhi Dialogue was an attempt to reassert its regional leadership role, which apparently prompted China and Pakistan to skip the summit. While China cited scheduling difficulties, Pakistan criticized India as a spoiler. Taliban, which was not invited, welcomed the conference as being in the better interest of Afghanistan.
China and Pakistan, for different reasons, gave the New Delhi-hosted security summit a miss. And the US also stayed away, perhaps expecting an earful from other participants at the summit over its botched military adventure in Afghanistan. Iran's top security official, Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani, who participated in the multilateral dialogue, minced no words in calling out the US for its disastrous military campaign in Afghanistan, its chaotic exit, the freezing of the country's assets, and paving the road for the resurgence of terrorist groups.
The Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani, represented the Islamic Republic at the Delhi Regional Security Dialogue on Afghanistan, making his country's position on security challenges facing Afghanistan and the region emphatically clear. He termed the US ouster from Afghanistan after 20 years of military occupation, marked by horrendous war crimes and human rights abuses, a disgraceful defeat. The US botched exit, he told participants at the summit, carried a lesson for others. He also slammed the US for freezing Afghanistan's assets and blamed Americans for the presence and expansion of terrorist groups like Daesh in the South Asian country. The top Iranian security official stressed that India has an important role in Afghanistan, while also acknowledging the role of other countries, including China and Pakistan. He also referred to humanitarian crisis facing the country and expressed Iran's readiness to help alleviate the sufferings of Afghans. Delhi Dialogue was a follow-up to the security summit hosted by Iran previously. An Iranian initiative, it seeks to streamline regional cooperation and collaboration against terrorist groups and their backers who seek to destabilize Afghanistan and the region at large.
Now, to have more insight, we are joined by Mr. Hossein Askari, a Southwest Asia coordinator at Schiller Institute. Now, Mr. Askari, first of all, welcome to the program. Now, how do you assess the geopolitical significance of the New Delhi Regional Security Conference on Afghanistan?
Hello to you and your audience on the program SUBCONTINENT. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. Of course, any such a gathering concerning Afghanistan and the situation in Afghanistan, which is so urgent, is useful. But I think this Delhi regional dialogue this time, it's more symbolic than practical. The important thing is that the regional powers acknowledge the role of India as a key partner and player in the security and strategic matters of the region, and also the problem that the fact that the Taliban were not invited and China and Pakistan declined to attend, that creates, of course, a certain setback. But I think as a symbolic move, it's very important, especially that the security officials of the countries around Pakistan are meeting, which gives it a different sense.
So did the dialogue hosted by India manage to evolve a unified pan-regional response to the war-ravaged country's crises?
Well, not really. They are merely repeating what was said already in other such gatherings, especially the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summits. But you know, I would like to comment on the final statement of certain points in the final statement of the Delhi Regional Dialogue, which I think are not right on the point. Point number 2, it says that the suffering in Afghanistan is caused by the deteriorating security situation. It's not true. The humanitarian crisis and the difficulties are caused by the Western powers blocking of Afghanistan's money, so Afghanistan cannot import food and medicine. And also the suffering is a result of 20 years of failures of the United States, of NATO, of the EU, Australia, and all their allies in building an economy, a resilient economy in Afghanistan, to be able to produce food, to provide the simple services and so on. Point 7 of the declaration says that it's calling for an open and truly inclusive government. This rhetoric is being repeated in every meeting by everybody. I don't think this is an important point. The story is that there is a government in Afghanistan. Of course, it didn't come through elections, but de facto there is a government in Afghanistan. What is important to do now is to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan and cooperate with Taliban to first end this humanitarian crisis, stabilize the situation, but at the same time demand that Taliban first respect the rights of the minorities, other minorities and groups, ethnic groups in Afghanistan, and 2, they should immediately start a reconciliation and national dialogue to plan for the coming period.
Now, Mr. Askari, do you think the summit attended by top security officials was an attempt by India to prove its relevance as a key regional player?
Look, India is a very important country. It's a relevant country, and it has played an important historical role through the years. But it seems to me that India is suffering, under the current leadership, is suffering from some sort of an identity crisis, because it has one foot in Asia, but it wants to have the other foot in the Atlantic region. It is, you know, it's like it has, it wants to be part of the Western alliance to limit and encircle China, which is not a conductive policy. It has gone against the Belt and Road Initiative, which every country in the region, including Afghanistan, say that this is important for Afghanistan and for the whole region to stabilize, to rebuild the economy, and bring prosperity and security in the whole region. So India, since 2001, India did great things in Afghanistan. They built the hydropower, they built the road they built the electricity grid from Uzbekistan to Kabul to provide the electricity. They built the 200-kilometer road from Zaranj to Delaram on the Iranian border, and the Chabahar road. So therefore, they have to continue doing these things. They provided wheat, hundreds of thousands of tons of wheat. They should continue doing this kind of work, but not under the leadership of the Atlantic Alliance, but in cooperation with the neighboring countries.
Mr. Askari, China and Pakistan notably skipped the New Delhi summit for different reasons. So why are there clashing visions on Afghanistan's future between these two countries and India?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, India, Pakistan, China, and the other countries, they should throw away the idea of geopolitics. This is a product of the British Empire. It's a British concoction. All the problems in the region go back historically to the British Empire. The Kashmir problem was created by the British Empire. The Afghanistan problems have been created by the British Empire. And therefore, we should leave India and Pakistan and China, all these countries, they should move from geopolitics to geoeconomics, because it's very important for India, Pakistan, China, Iran, and others, and Afghanistan to build economic ties. And they should go ahead and build the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. They should at the same time connect the Iran, Pakistan, India gas pipeline. They should start there. They should not wait to solve all the old historical political problems, but they should start with normalization of relations by connecting the countries of the region with infrastructure, roads, electricity, gas pipelines, oil pipelines, water management systems. This is what our Schiller Institute is calling for. We just had a conference in the United States where we both called for the unfreezing of the money of Afghanistan, but also to help integrate Afghanistan into the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road, and that all countries, including India, should be part of that, with Iran, with the Central Asian nations, and Russia, and so on and so forth.
Mr. Askari, thank you for your precious time and knowledge. Now, let's see how people on social media see the situation.
Dmitry Solodov, a spokesperson for Russian embassy in New Delhi, expresses gratitude to India for hosting the security summit on Afghanistan and says Russia's stance is in line with Delhi declaration. Indian journalist and author Stanley Johnny notes that New Delhi lacks the clout to influence or oppose Taliban, so it has to work with Russia and Iran, the two key players who want stability in Afghanistan. Sushmit Patil, an international affairs analyst, quotes Iran's top security official Rear Admiral Ali Shamkhani saying that the US must pay reparation to people of Afghanistan for the 20-year military occupation.
People in war-ravaged Afghanistan have been tormented by grinding poverty and hunger for decades. But since the botched exit of the US-led international forces and the sweeping takeover of the Taliban 3 months ago, the country has been teetering on the brink of a major humanitarian catastrophe. UN agencies have already sounded alarm bells warning that millions of Afghans could run out of food before the onset of the upcoming harsh winter, as well as around 1 million children being at the risk of starvation and death.
That 20 years of foreign military occupation brought nothing but misery and despondency to the people in Afghanistan is clearly evident now. 3 months after the US-led coalition hastily abandoned the country, millions of Afghans are on the brink of starvation, with no food and no money. Parallels are already being drawn between Afghanistan and Yemen, the two strategically located, mineral-rich countries plundered and destroyed by foreign aggressors.
Afghanistan, almost 23 million people are marching towards starvation. 8.7 million are on famine's door. 95% of the people don't have enough food. It's a crisis. It's a catastrophe.
With nearly the entire population teetering on the brink of grinding poverty, global humanitarian watchdogs are sounding the alarm over the likelihood of mass starvation across Afghanistan. A top official of the UN World Food Programme has termed it the worst humanitarian crisis on Earth, while a senior executive of the UN Developed Programme has described it as the worst humanitarian disaster he has ever seen. These statements point to the gravity and magnitude of the unfolding crisis, with about 97% of the 38 million population sinking into an abyss of poverty. Among those at risk include 4 million children under 5 who are staring at severe malnutrition. And worse, tens of thousands of people are getting displaced. The Norwegian Refugee Council this week reported that up to 300,000 Afghans have made their way to Iran since August, fleeing poverty and death.
Afghanistan did not plunge into this crisis situation overnight. It has been in the making for decades, essentially manufactured by the foreign powers that invaded the country in October 2001 and patronized and funded militia groups in decades before that. Its policy hasn't changed a bit. Having left the country, the US government has now found a novel way to strangulate poor Afghans by freezing their assets and blocking international aid while issuing statements of concern over the unfolding crisis in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan was already battling drought, and a large number of Afghans were already vulnerable to food crisis before the Taliban led a sweeping takeover of the country in August. But the impending famine is the direct result of the chaotic withdrawal of US-led international coalition forces. Even the New York Times, which has effectively played its role as the devil's advocate, recently admitted that the crisis in Afghanistan was in large part American-made, fueled by deliberate policy choices with results that were predicted months in advance. Soon after the Taliban laid siege to Kabul mid-August, US and its international partners raced to cut off Afghanistan's access to international aid and froze roughly $10 billion in assets belonging to the country's central bank. The move triggered the rapid collapse of public finances and precipitated the current crisis. European Union also then followed the suit, stopping development assistance to the country, followed by the International Monetary Fund and World Bank. Calls are growing for the US to unfreeze funds that has led to the collapse of Afghanistan's domestic economy, even as 38 million Afghans stare at death and starvation with the onset of harsh winter. Human rights activists say statements of concern won't suffice. Real action and practical steps would.
Now, to have more insight, we are joined by Mrs. Tara Rayner O'Grady, Secretary General of Human Rights Sentinel. Now, Mrs. O'Grady, welcome to the program. First of all, Afghanistan is teetering on the brink of a worst humanitarian catastrophe with millions without food. So what should the international community be doing to avert the impending crisis?
Thank you for having me join your show. I'm very honored to be here and for my voice to be included in this discussion on Afghanistan. I believe Afghanistan was effectively hijacked as an entire country and administered by external interests who ensured through military intervention that resources continued to flow through and out of the country. It may not be possible to completely avert the crisis the people face this season, but it could be effectively managed in partnership with those approved international NGOs who need safe access to the country and who seek to alleviate the existing suffering and who can hopefully assist with improving relations within the community through consistent communication and cooperation with the Taliban authorities to ensure that adequate food, medicine and fuel reaches those who are the most vulnerable and who are already struggling.
Now, do you think it was the US or the US-led coalition that paved the way for this disaster?
Certainly, by abandoning the country in the manner that they did, the United States lost an incalculable amount of money by ditching weapons, technology and logistical supplies at military compounds and forsaking thousands of people who had contributed years of valuable work and who were committed to improving life in the country for those who stayed after that initial post-9/11 occupation. This created a deadly situation for many Afghani families. But I would ask your viewers to consider for a moment that America is not in great shape herself, with literally thousands of homeless families, millions without work and struggling, an unmitigated drug problem, rampant gangland murders, blue and white collar crime, and further millions without access to any form of adequate health care. So really, America cannot continue to be seen either as a beacon of hope on the one hand, or indeed as the root of all evil on the other. They have taken for granted an impossible and incredible status on the global stage, when in actual fact their own enormous internal issues are difficult to cope with. And because the new administration recognised this and has acknowledged it, their international agenda has shifted, and they are focusing more of their energy and resources back towards themselves. While undeniably the US coalition did certainly pave the way, in a manner of speaking, for this disaster we're watching unfold, it surely cannot have been a foregone conclusion. There are many regional allies with significant finance at their disposal to invest in or donate to Afghanistan, but there must be some treaty or mechanism developed with the Taliban, who must prove that they are willing to respect human rights, particularly women's rights, and to show that they're able to govern in a way that none of the other ethnic groups can feel marginalised.
Now, Mrs. O'Grady, a recent report estimated that nearly 23 million of the country's 38 million people will not have enough food to get through the harsh winter. Now, instead of showing concern, shouldn't the US move to unfreeze the Afghan funds?
This looming humanitarian catastrophe has two sides, and it presents one of those very difficult dilemmas for donor communities. For me, it raises the question of reparations. On a personal level, it would seem prudent to me that those states who contributed to the disastrous situation that has manifested in Afghanistan should be held accountable and pay reparations for the damage that was caused to every level of Afghani infrastructure. We cannot justify giving credibility to rulers who took a country by force, but the Taliban are almost reluctant conquerors. They're still in the honeymoon phase of this administration, and the freezing of assets was done by the US Treasury as a means of leverage to influence and, frankly, strong-arm a change in the Taliban's behaviour, but it's clearly not working. Therefore, the US needs to be creative on how these sanctions could be developed in a more sophisticated manner and designed in a way that would not affect the general public, which really seems a virtually impossible task. One proposal that I've heard suggests that sectors such as health and education should be exempt from the sanctions. We will just watch how it is unfolding and continue to try to pressure for some reason and sense around that.
On that note, I would like to thank Mrs. O'Grady for being on the programme. And now, let's see how people have reacted on social media.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says he has been warning of the humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan while urging the international community to act swiftly and avert the impending crisis. Azad Essa, a US-based journalist, slams Western countries and international bodies for suspending aid to Afghanistan and blocking access to its foreign assets, asking whether it is a food crisis or murder.
And that was our episode about the New Delhi-hosted regional security dialogue on Afghanistan and the unfolding humanitarian crisis in the South Asian country. Now, to watch the previous episodes and more updates, follow us on social media platforms and don't forget to give us your feedback. We shall meet again, same time, same day next week. So till then, take care.